Welcome back, everybody. My name is Marcus Medina, and today we're going to talk about essay and research introductions at the grade 7 level. We're going to talk about hooks and funnel techniques. So, welcome to Skill Excel. I'm your host, and now let's learn about introducing introductions. Now, whenever you're writing an introduction, you want to pay attention to, well, first off, some of these techniques that I'm going to be teaching you here. We have the hook. The hook is made for grabbing the reader's attention, and the funnel is the structure of that introduction. It's how your introductions are written. So if you follow these two types of skills that I'm going to show you today, introductions will become easier for you. Now, remember that hooks are optional and they're useful. But what we mean by optional is, well, you get to choose to use certain types of hooks, which I'll show you today. And remember that these are the first sentences that makes readers interested. Okay. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to grab someone's attention, right? You want a certain type of sentence. Sometimes you can mix them up a little bit, but it just depends on which sentence you use at a logical level. Next, you want to give a background. If you provide some kind of context before you provide the thesis, which is the final sentence that is, well, best to write. Not always the final, but usually it's the last sentence of the introduction. Your readers will understand greatly of what you're trying to talk about. Now, remember the techniques for introductions in a funnel start with one, a wide scope, right? And then that scope becomes more narrow. And what we mean is you might have a short sentence that starts the paragraph, your introductory paragraph, but you might have longer sentences that progress. What we mean is, like a funnel, like this, is that the big side, the opening here, I'll show you here, the opening right here is going to accept everything, but only the liquid that passes through the pipeline will go inside of the, well, maybe if you have a flask or a vial or maybe even a water bottle. Only what passes through that tube will go directly into that bottle or the flask. Now, the problem is that, of course, if you have a lot of big sentences, you might draw your reader away, right? A lot of long sentences with, a lot of words. It might bore out the reader. So, starting with strong vocabulary and fewer words in a shorter sentence, and then progressively getting longer, kind of like a step to the pyramid, and then going back down again is very important here. So remember the scope, going from general, broader vocabulary, meaning vocabulary where it can be explained but not understood outright. And then you can start using smaller, more specific vocabulary, like instead of using parents, you start with parents first, and then you go with mom and dad because that makes up about 3 words, whereas parents makes up about one, a general word. So your funnel structure, again, will start with a general idea. It will have a topic focus as you develop and progress through the introduction. And then, of course, your thesis, the point that you're trying to make. And of course, if you want to know more about thesis, hang tight. And I will break down the process of a thesis in a very easy manner in the future. But for now, let's look at a couple thesis examples here in our introduction. So first, when you have a general idea what you want to write about, this is something that you need to know before you write an introduction. So for example, for the seventh graders who are working towards, let's say like the Savas My Perspectives books, for example, you might have a general idea on animal protection, right? The general idea is the overall goal of the paper, which is oftentimes separate from the topic, but the idea is expressed the ideas are expressed through the goals that you have for that topic. So when we get into the topic focus, of course, we're going to ask ourselves a question. What animal are we protecting? Okay, if the goal is about protecting an animal, then the topic focus will be the animal's actual name. So you'll say the big-eared elephant. For instructional purposes only, the big-eared elephant is a fictional animal. So I chose to use a fictional animal. And the thesis will be based on, or the thesis statement, which will involve that thesis, the overall purpose of the paper, the answer of the question. Um, if the answer is, or if the prompt is, what dangers are animals facing, and what are the humans doing uh, to help solve the problem, then we would get a thesis like this. Organizations in Africa and Asia organize 3 ways to protect the big ear elephant. Now, we don't say which organizations specifically because we want to save those for later. We want to save those for the body paragraph when we have space to talk about them. Which countries in Africa or Asia you ask, that will become more specific in the topic as you develop it through the body. And then, of course, what are the 3 ways? Well, if you're writing a 3 paragraph paper, like an essay, then each paragraph will touch up on one of those ways, one of those 3 ways to protect the elephant. But the elephant will appear in every sentence of every paragraph, or at least in some form as a pronoun or the word animal, like a common noun or something like that. Now, elephants are some of the most interesting animals on the planet. The big-eared elephant is known for its large ears. These elephants use their ears to survive in hot environments, and then you can go on and read the rest. Now, if you're finished reading, just understand that this is a general information funnel introduction. The goal is to provide a variety of information that becomes more revealing or develops into specific pieces of information for the reader before expressing the thesis statement. As you can see, the thesis statement that I had before appears at the bottom. Here is the general sentence, and then you have the focus, which is the big-eared elephant. So again, when I started my first sentence here, general elephants are some of the most interesting animals on Earth. We don't necessarily know yet that it's the big-eared elephant. We just start off with a general sentence about elephants. Then we get more specific to the big-eared elephants, okay? And then what makes them unique is the sentence. Okay, that's the get the focus on that elephant, and every other sentence talks about that elephant, even in pronoun form. These elephants only refer to the big-eared elephant, not the other elephants that you may know around the world. Of course, like I said, this is a fictional elephant, so please don't consider this as factual, actual, and factual. But what we can do is, for instructional purposes only, just remember that this is a fact based, maybe on fiction, but it is a fact based on how to write an introduction. All you need to do basically is just replace elephant with your own animal, and then maybe add some detail or change the detail for large ears. Maybe you can change the quality of body parts or something like that, something interesting for the animal in its place, and you'll still have the same thing, right? So basically, this is just a framework of creating a what we call an expository style introduction, general information. As you can see, the thesis at the bottom, the order is all about the same. You'll see some of these techniques being used, like this one, a little later. Now, you can go ahead and read this paragraph if you like. You would like to pause and read so that you can understand. Okay, so the anecdote is basically a something like a factual story that has taken place. Most times, the writer may have familiarity with the story, but sometimes the writer might not know the exact names of certain people, places, or things. The purpose of the anecdote is to tell a story that relates to the thesis, to provide a contextual, factual story that will help some writers, not just writers, but it helps readers connect to the thesis in a sort of storytelling manner. And it uses something like a real life account, right? You do not want to use anecdotes for fictional things unless you're using the anecdote within a frame of narrative. Let's say maybe in like in a book report or like a special book report where you're talking about a literary device, or maybe you're discussing character development. That is when an anecdote can be fictional, but of course most anecdotes are nonfiction. So for questions, you can pause if you like and read the paragraph. Now, if you're finished reading the paragraph, note that the questions are used on introductions, generally to as rhetorical questions. They're meant to be answered not by the audience, but by the writer themselves. This is used to get a person to think. So think of your mother asking you why you didn't do your homework, and she probably knows why you didn't do your homework. She watched you play your game all day in the house, so you're sitting on the couch, and of course, she might not know that you actually have homework, but when she finds out that you had homework and you didn't do it, she might ask you why. But of course, she's just doing that to get you to realize your mistake, right? I mean, by answering the question, you might be making an excuse that is not desirable. So, of course, like I said, if your mother knows why you didn't do it, she still asks. She just wants you to act with urgency and correct the mistakes that that you may be facing next time or at the time of the occurrence. Now, this is called rhetorical questioning. It is a good way to start the paper because the reader will be drawn to whatever the questions may be. And that is because they know that the writer will answer the question through a general statement of information. So as you can see here, the question here was how many animals could cool itself, right? Then they go on to answer. The big elephant with his massive ears of 250 centimeters, should be a comma here, sorry guys, has the ability to cool itself to what zoologists report are near chilling temperatures, right? So this is an example here that I created myself. Sorry, you guys, I didn't include that comma, but a good writer also can admit to their mistakes and correct them as well, even on screen, you guys. So yes, the questions here are made for not for you to answer. So if you ask a question and then you go off without answering the question, then there's no need to ask the question. Just keep that in mind. Again, an unanswered question has no place on the paper. It's better to just answer the question rhetorically. Now, for visual pictures, as you can see, this is a very short entry, so I will go ahead and explain why I have it as a short thing here. It says, imagine seeing your favorite animal in a zoo or circus. The next week, a report reveals that the whole species is facing extinction. And then you will go on to maybe further provide other information, or you can continue the story from here. Now, for visual pictures, they don't necessarily have to go on with the middle or end. The facts that exist can go on as the middle or end, so general information can be placed after this, which is why I didn't put anything here. But of course, I would implore for all of my audience to insert what they think in their own mind, what the continuation of this paragraph would be. And of course, the thesis will come somewhere around here. Now, the visual picture is a technique that is used to get readers to imagine something. The writer may start with a word or phrase, and they may command the reader to imagine, picture, or think about this, right? They'll say, picture this or imagine this. Think about a dog running through your house with mud on his feet. Like, you can think about the dog. Maybe you will think about a corgi, or you think about a giant, what is it, Saint Bernard, or a Great Dane running through your house with mud on your feet. Like, I mean, on their paws, and they're making all these marks, right? Like, you can see it in your mind, right? So that's what the visual picture is made to do. But of course, you don't want to go too far into the story. There's really no story here with the visual picture. It's just, again, a way to hook the reader. So don't spend too much time and too many sentences on creating the visual picture, right? You're probably thinking, well, I want to tell my story, but that's not the point. The point is to lure the person in for 2 to 3 sentences and then move on to the context of the paper and then your thesis, right? So they will begin to tell a developing story that will get the reader's imagination going. The readers can try to picture what is happening to develop an understanding of the thesis. Now, visual pictures do not have to be true, meaning they can be hypothetical, right? But they have a factual basis that is realistic, so the readers can understand the context of the thesis. Now, let's talk about sentences that will appear midway through. And you saw in the earlier example here, you saw this percentage being used, right? So whenever you're using a percentage or statistic or whatever, um, and of course this includes numbers and whatnot, keep in mind that there may be some sort of anecdote or historical context being used right before it, or maybe some general information. Usually you will not use these with uh, something like an maybe a visual picture or something like that. Well, I mean, you could, but it just depends on the strategy that you have and the organization of your sentences. But of course, we can state here the big-eared elephants might not be able to fly, but his ears can release up to 20% of body heat. And then you put the source name down, okay? And then you go on to talk about the problem, the context of the paper, and then you can get into the thesis. Now, in the middle of an introduction, you might have something called a statistic. They use very similarly, um, or they use quotations very similarly to the body paragraph of an essay or maybe an extended paragraph. Statistics represent a general idea that is used to add urgency to the reading. So basically, when you use statistics at the very beginning, it's trying to highlight especially with a large number, a particular problem or issue, maybe a range of success or failure, and how it can be drawn to read to readers what successes or problems may arise in the thesis. So, if you're going to produce a statistics in the introduction, again, you'll need to also consider citing them, as we have here, West Nazareth News. Now, of course, this is a fictional newspaper that was created by me and um, my literature universe, right? So uh, remember, this is also instructional purposes only. Now, to learn about citations and how you can use them properly, or at least in an easy way, you can watch my video about sources and citations, which I will happily link in the description of this video. So, of course, if you're watching this before that link is up, just have some patience. That video will be up soon. But I guarantee that if a week or so has gone by the time of the posting, then the citations video will be available. Now, for historical context, remember, you're using history to provide context on the thesis where actual events are being recorded to provide a basis or thesis. So, of course, this example is being a factual historical context piece. It is written for instructional purposes only, right? So, like I said before, uh, this has never happened, but if in reality you're using historical context, be sure for this hook type to use a real life event as a background for understanding when progressing towards the thesis. So again, you don't want to make up any fictional information, but I'm doing this for the purpose of the video. You can go ahead and take a read and pause, and then when you're ready, unpause. All right, now, so getting into the parts of the historical context is always important to include a year. I used in mid 1950s, indicating a time frame, and it's a time frame that it happened in the past. You can also use something that happened in contemporary history, so the year 2000s, 2010s, or even 2025, which was a year from the time of this posting ago. You can still use that as what we call historical context. So, looking at the events, we talk about beginning events. We go in chronological order. What is the first thing that happened? And then what is the second thing that happened? Right. And then, of course, we get into the thesis. Right. So, since 1965, notice the thesis has changed a little bit in here. I added a year just because I use historical context. So I'm trying to transition from the time, the time of from the beginning to the time of now, right? There's been from since 1965, so that means ongoing until now, several key organizations in Africa. So I just added the several key organizations in Africa and Asia organized ways to protect the big endangered big-eared elephants. So um, by using historical context, anecdotes, questions, you may have to change your thesis a little bit, your thesis statement, but it will primarily remain the same. So thank you for attending my tutorial. If you have any questions or other experiences writing introductions, or if my videos helped you out in any way, and you want to share your experience, feel free to leave a comment. If you are interested in my other videos or future updates or other tutorials, please subscribe to my videos to receive the guidance that you need to excel. Look out for more videos from Skill Excel, and I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.